Did you know that Headmaster Ambrose was originally planned to be the ice school professor? Or that there's a secret ring with insane stats only obtainable by KingsIsle developers? Hey everyone, I'm Gladrocker, and I'm here to cover facts, mysteries, conspiracies, and generally unknown information about Wizard101. I did a ton of research and split up my information into different tiers, from most well-known to least well-known. I guarantee you that if you stick around until the end, you'll learn tons of incredible Wizard101 info that you've never known before. I just want to point out that even though I did make this massive Wizard101 Iceberg myself, I took a lot of inspiration from existing ones on Reddit. Now there's a lot of material to cover, and honestly, I could make a video for each one of these entries alone, so I'll do my best to keep every entry concise. Also, just a fair warning, some of these topics do get pretty dark, so viewer discretion is advised. Let's begin. TV commercials. In the early days of Wizard101, KingsIsle put a lot of money into advertising in hopes to bring more players to the game. This included airing a bunch of TV commercials, which are now pretty easy to find on YouTube. The most popular commercials fans still talk about today consist of 3 reimagined scenes from the original Malastare fight, showcasing the spells Fire Dragon, Stormlord, and Frost Giant. These commercials were especially appealing because of their highly detailed cinematic effects, especially during the 2010s when they aired. In fact, they were so visually appealing that they made the actual game's graphics appear very underwhelming in comparison, leaving players wishing for the game to one day look as good as the commercials. Orthrus Creepy Moon. This one's a fan favorite. The animation that plays during the rank 7 myth spell Orthrus consists of a giant moon looming over the night sky. When the spell first came out during the April 2009 update, the developers gave this moon a creepy face, hence why players call it Creepy Moon. Players became very intrigued as to why KingsIsle made the moon so disturbing looking, and it quickly became a hot conversation topic within the Wizard101 community. Then almost a decade after it was put into the game, during the summer 2017 update, KingsIsle actually went ahead and removed the moon's creepy face entirely, leaving tons of players who had grown attached to it very disappointed. And when I say disappointed, that's an understatement. There's been tons of posts all over different social media platforms begging KI to bring the creepy moon back to the spell's animation. Finally, 3 years later, during the summer 2020 update, to everyone's surprise, KingsIsle actually listened and brought the creepy moon back. So as of right now, you'll once again be able to see this extremely unsettling face in the night sky when casting Orthrus. Zeke quests. In every world, Prospector Zeke gives the player a quest to find a bunch of objects in return for a training point. Everyone knows that. But what you might not know is that all of his training point quests are actually pop culture references to rock bands. Since there's so many, I'm just going to go down the list as quickly as possible. Wizard City, the Smiths. Krokotopia, the Beatles. Wisteria, Wallflowers. Marleybone, Stray Cats. Grizzleheim, the Yardbirds. Mooshu, Blue Oyster Cult. Wintertusk, the Trogs. Dragonspire, the Stone Roses. Celestia, the Lounge Lizards. Zafaria, the Monkeys. Avalon, the Black Crows. Azteca, UFO. Chrysalis, the Crickets and Iron Butterfly. Polaris, Vanilla Ice. Mirage, Oasis. Imperia, Hootie and the Blowfish. Caramel, the Lemonheads. Lemuria, Led Zeppelin. And Novus, the Talking Heads. Cool Ranch. It isn't quite clear exactly why Cool Ranch is on this iceberg, but it's most likely because players have been predicting Cool Ranch as an upcoming world for years. In case you've never heard of it before, Cool Ranch is a desert world in the Spiral, very much like the Wild West. It appears as a main world in Pirate 101, but not yet in Wizard 101. However, that hasn't stopped Wizard 101 fans over the years from making tons of requests, predictions, and false claims that Cool Ranch will be added as the next in-game world. The main reason for all this fan speculation is that there's already been a few in-game references to Cool Ranch. There's the Quake Charmer, a boss in Caramel, who comes from Cool Ranch, and there's the Great Sky Train Robbery Gauntlet, which takes place in Cool Ranch, and rewards you Cool Ranch-themed mounts, pets, and gear. Sheep Pet. The elusive sheep pet is extremely rare, as it's literally impossible to obtain in-game as a normal player. This pet can only be obtained by KingsIsle employees, or as a special gift from them. And good luck trying to hatch for one. If you ever come across someone with a sheep pet in the hatchery, you're out of luck, because hatching with one results in a goat monk. Good boy, good girl. This entry references a rumor most players believed back when Maycast talents were first released in the game. Maycast talents basically allow players to randomly cast certain spells in the middle of their battles. There's nothing the player could do to trigger a Maycast talent or increase the odds of it happening. It's completely random as far as we know. However, there used to be a community-wide rumor that if the player compliments their pet during a battle using the menu chat options good boy and good girl, this would increase the rate of their pet's Maycast talents. It's pretty obvious that this is not true at all. The developers would never code this into their game, and these days this rumor has been pretty much completely forgotten. Massive Fantasy Palace. The Massive Fantasy Palace was obtainable from the first ever housing bundle in Wizard101, the Epic Bundle. This bundle was released in July 2011 for $39 US, and along with the Massive Fantasy Palace, it also came with a Swift Griffin mount, prestigious attire, and some other items. At the time, this house was a big deal for players. Not only was the Massive Fantasy Palace the largest in-game house with a super fancy interior and exterior, but it was the only house to come with its own PvP ring. So back in the day, players used to gather for huge PvP parties at Massive Fantasy Palaces. It was basically where the cool players hung out. Besides its raging popularity in the early 2010s, the only other reason why the Massive Fantasy Palace is notable enough to appear on this iceberg is that you can fish for prestigious attire in the water here, and there's this out-of-place creepy hallway in the basement. It's only here for decoration though. You can't walk in or out of it. Pet Derby. There isn't too much to say about Pet Derby other than the fact that it's pretty much dead at this point, and has since become a meme around the community. There's extremely little incentive to participate because the rewards just aren't worth it, and so few players actually participate that it's difficult to even join a race. Europe server. In addition to the main US server, Wizard101 also exists on a Europe server. For a long time, this server was hosted by Gameforge, an international video game publishing company, instead of KingsIsle. This Europe server was notorious for receiving game updates way later than the US server. They would often be 1 to 2 worlds behind. And they were also known for having a drastically smaller player population than the US server, so finding other players to quest with was not easy. It was announced on May 2022 that the Gameforge Wizard101 Europe server would be shutting down, and that KingsIsle would host a new Europe server. And to incentivize players migrating their game data from Gameforge to KingsIsle, all players that registered for this transition received the following rewards: a free 2-week membership, the new Wings of Kings mount, and the new Dragon of King's pet. Retired TC. Since Wizard101's been around for over a decade, it's no surprise there's been some retired content from the game. And by retired, I don't necessarily mean removed from the game's code, but rather no longer regularly obtainable by players. A classic example of this is a handful of treasure cards that were retired early on in the game's lifespan. 3 of the more notable retired TC, which are no longer obtainable through conventional methods in-game, are Lifebane, Elucidate, and Dampen Magic. Let's go one by one. Lifebane costs 2 pips and dispels the next incoming life spell. Since this spell was only available very early on in the game's release, it's pretty unclear what it actually does. According to some players who actually had a chance to cast it, it doesn't show any animation and basically works as a life dispel. And that may be the case now, but I personally believe it was originally intended to nullify incoming heal spells, such that if you'd cast Lifebane on an opponent, any of their subsequent incoming heal spells would heal them 0 health. Elucidate is a sun enchant that reduces a spell's pip cost by 2. For instance, if you enchant Stormlord with it, Stormlord will only cost 5 pips to cast. This was likely retired because of how overpowered it could be. Imagine feint stacking for 0 pips at a time. Pretty busted. Dampen Magic is a global bubble that limits all casters to a 3 pip maximum. This includes power pips as well. I imagine this spell was retired from the game because of how much it could stall out matches. Let's say you're only carrying 7 pip hits and your opponent casts Dampen Magic. Then you'd be completely stall locked for the rest of the fight without being able to cast a single hit. There's no way you'd be able to win at that point unless your opponent flees. It's important to note that some of these retired TC could still be received through trading if a player obtained them in the past, like Lifebane and Elucidate. These are very high in demand, whereas others are completely untradeable, like Dampen Magic. So I hate to break it to you, but if you ever wanted to get your hands on a Dampen Magic TC, it's just no longer possible. Beta spell animations. As you can imagine, since the game's been around for over a decade, lots of changes have been made to spell animations. Some more recent ones include audio changes to Stormshark, Kraken, and Pixie. However, there's two spell animations from way back in the game's 2008 beta that were later reworked that I find the most strange: Imp and Banshee. Imp's beta animation had it circle around the opponent, making lashing noises. This animation is actually still used for the Myth Imp spell. And Banshee's beta animation was even creepier. Its scream lasted for twice as long. Honestly, I find it a little disturbing. Belladonna Crisp. Belladonna Crisp is the headmistress of Pigswick Academy, Ravenwood's rivaling school. I'm not exactly sure why she's listed on the iceberg, but if I had to take a guess, it's because of how much the player base sexualizes her. Whenever there's a meme or poll on social media debating who the most attractive Wizard101 character is, she almost always makes an appearance. And apparently, there's a good deal of Rule 34 artwork relating to her, but please, don't look any of that up. Music videos. Back in the early 2010s, fan-made Wizard101 music videos were extremely popular on YouTube. This trend usually consisted of a pop song playing in the background, while a group of wizards danced and sang to the lyrics. The quality of these music videos was always pretty bad, but that was mostly due to the limitations of early editing softwares. Oh, and I'm not going to play the audio of these videos for obvious copyright reasons. But even with lackluster quality, these videos would reach over 100,000 views. In fact, the top Wizard101 music video of all time was made 12 years ago by user 111 Pyro to the song La 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 by Auburn. It currently has over 519,000 views, which is considered a ton for fan-made Wizard101 content. Other examples of popular songs used for these videos were DJ Got Us Falling in Love Again, Dynamite, and Break Your Heart. This was 2010 after all. In the comments section of these Wizard101 music videos, you'll find viewers reminiscing about their glory days on Wiz, admitting the content itself is pretty cringeworthy, but overall, the memories were worth it. Meowmodon. The charity Meowmodon was an exclusive charity mount that entered the Crown Shop on December 14th, 2008. It left the shop on January 5th, 2009, so players only had a little under a month to purchase it. It cost roughly $15 and all proceeds went to two charities, Austin Children's Shelter and Child's Play. In total, KingsIsle raised $126,000 during the event. There's been plenty of charity mounts released over the years, so why is Meowmodon so special? Well, considering Wizard101 was released on September 2nd, 2008, only 3 months before the Meowmodon entered the Crown Shop, you had to be an extremely early player to purchase one, thus making the mount incredibly rare. If anyone actually has a Meowmodon mount, let me know in the comments below. Wizardblox. You know the fairgrounds in the commons where you could play minigames to fill your mana and potions? Well, one of its minigames, Sorcery Stones, has a mobile app version called Wizardblox. In Wizardblox, you touch and slide blocks to match at least 3 of the same color in a row, before they reach the top of the screen. The main difference between the mobile app Wizardblox and its in-game counterpart, Sorcery Stones, is that in Wizardblox, you can actually earn codes based on how well you perform. You can redeem these codes in the North American version of Wizard101 for in-game rewards. These rewards consist of gold, reagents, pet snacks, mount rentals, potions, and other surprises, according to the official Wizard101 website. Wizardblox was released on the Apple Store in early 2010 and received its last update on October 24th, 2017. You can still download it to this day. Carpet glitch. This refers to a carpet stacking method players use to access out-of-bound areas in their house. If you space carpets close enough together vertically, they can act like a staircase, allowing your wizard to walk up and down. These days, it's pretty simple to do this because we have advanced movement, but back in the day before advanced movement was a thing, it was a lot harder. Players relied on crates and other objects to glitch their carpets into a stack. It was common to make long trails of floating carpets in your house to show off to your friends. Hall monitor. Hall monitors are not to be confused with KI employees. They're just regular players chosen by KI to have extra chat moderation privileges. According to a section of 2012 update notes, hall monitors who are selected by invitation only will have the ability to take direct action when they see behavior that violates our terms of service. This action includes warning and muting players who circumvent our chat filters. These sanctions will be reviewed by our senior wizards to ensure the correct action was taken and may escalate sanctions as necessary. So yeah, apparently they could temporarily mute other players but not directly ban them from the game. They're also required by KI to never divulge that they're a hall monitor, so it's a completely anonymous position, and you'll never know exactly who they are, but you'll get a server message whenever a nearby player is muted by one. Tadpole. The tadpole is a common rank 1 life school fish only available through fishing in Northgard or someone's massive fantasy palace. There's not much to say about this fish other than the fact that its name is a nod to J. Todd Coleman, co-creator of Wizard101. Fog Unicorn. The Fog Unicorn was a promotional pet available from the Beckett Fun Online Games magazine, issue number 2, distributed in fall 2009. The word fog comes from an acronym of the magazine title, Fun Online Games, and interestingly enough, it used to be capitalized in the pet's name, but KI later changed it to lowercase. This change was most likely to no longer associate this pet with the magazine company. It's also worth noting that you can't hatch for this pet, since hatching with it would result in a grove unicorn, thus making the Fog Unicorn even more rare. However, over the years, the Fog Unicorns become available through KI free games prizes, daily assignment chests, and even crowns packs, so it's no longer as rare as it once was. Headmaster Greyrose. Did you know Merle Ambrose was not originally planned to be the headmaster of Ravenwood? In a public Facebook post on December 21st, 2012, J. Todd Coleman, co-founder of KI, stated, "In my original draft, Lydia Greyrose was the headmistress of Ravenwood. Merle Ambrose was the ice professor. After doing an early round of focus testing, we found that Ambrose was much more popular, and so the two were swapped, and Greyrose was given wings and made into a fairy godmother. This also implies that Lydia Greyrose originally had a human design. Well, do we know what these early designs for Headmistress Greyrose and Ice School Professor Ambrose would have looked like? Interestingly, in a video posted by King's Isle Entertainment on April 23, 2010, titled Making of Wizard101 Part 3, you could see character animator Evan Calderero discussing original concept art for Wizard101. If you pause at the right time, you could see a version of Merle Ambrose with a more icy design, even holding an ice wand, next to Cyrus Drake and Moolinda Wu. We can infer that this is what he would have looked like as an ice school professor. Additionally, the in-game item Portrait of Lydia Greyrose shows Professor Greyrose in an outfit never shown elsewhere in the game. And since the portrait only shows a small portion of her body, this could be the human design she originally had as headmistress. Empower Black Market. This refers to the phenomenon of underground trading markets created by the player base. There's several Discord servers dedicated to trading items in-game, and none of them are regulated by King's Isle. The most popular server, Gamma's Trading Post, has over 2,000 members. In it, you'll find players buying and selling almost everything possible, from rare treasure cards to crowns items to even in-game mercenary services. But how do we know the value of all these items? How can we compare the value of, let's say, a simplified treasure card to an energy elixir? That's where the Empower treasure card comes in. Because Empower is tradable and one of the most expensive treasure cards sellable in the bazaar, It quickly became the universal currency for underground trading markets. In fact, Gamma's trading post provides a very extensive value guide specifying how many empowers every tradable item is worth. It's pretty neat how the community came together to build such a complex empower market underneath the actual game. And to this day, it's extremely popular to participate in. Valor Sword. Oh boy. This is probably the most well-known controversy surrounding item code giveaways. If you didn't know, KingsIsle often hands out free codes to live streamers so they can host giveaways on stream. It's a win-win-win. KingsIsle wins because they're incentivizing more Wizard101 content creation, which promotes the game. The streamers win because they get more viewers, and the viewers win because they have a chance to get crowns or a special item. In fact, back when I used to stream on Twitch, I myself was handed some crowns codes from KI to give away during special live streams. Normally, these codes don't contain much value, maybe a couple thousand crowns or a pretty common mount, but KI is pretty tolerable with streamers requesting specific item codes, if there's something in particular they want to give away. So eventually, someone was bound to make an unethical request. And that's exactly what happened in June 2020. A small streamer requested a Valor Sword code to give away to one of their followers. For some background, the Valor Sword is one of the most rare, if not the rarest item in the entire game. It's a wand that was given out only to veterans, current military personnel, or their family members in recognition of Veterans Day way back in 2009. That's 1 year after the game was released. So obviously, the Valor Sword has become one of the most coveted items in Wizard101. Players often request to buy off accounts that have this item for egregious prices, which by the way is extremely against the terms of use, so don't do that. Anyway, once word got out that some small creator gave away a Valor Sword code, the community was outraged. Their reason being that this item was supposed to honor those who served and their families. So by devaluing it like this, it comes off as disingenuous and downright insulting. Fortunately, a few days later, the developers confirmed it was a mistake on their part and they should have never handed a code out for an item that exclusive. They said they'd contact the person who received the Valor Sword code and provide them with an alternative. Even though KI admitted it was their fault, some people still faulted the streamer since they had to know what they were doing, requesting an item code that valuable. Either way, KI still took the blame. Props to them for owning up to their mistake and resolving it. Old Wild Bolt. This refers to the original release of Wild Bolt in 2010, where it dealt a guaranteed 1000 damage but only with 10% accuracy, as opposed to how it is today with the chance to deal 10, 100, or 1000 damage with a normal 70% accuracy. The original spell was broken, and players abused the hell out of it in PvP, because enchanting it with Sniper and wearing Commander gear at the time raised its accuracy to 46%, which is definitely worth it considering you're dishing out a guaranteed 1000 damage at the cost of only 2 pips. OG Bone Dragon Mount. The Bone Dragon Mount is obtainable as a drop from various bosses during the Lost Pages event, and from the Dragon's Horde pack. But it hasn't always looked the way it does now. Apparently, back when the Dragon's Horde pack was first released in June 2011, a permanent version of this Bone Dragon Mount was released using a model directly based off the actual Skeletal Dragon spell. For some reason, only a few days after this pack's release, KingsIsle swapped this model with another one, but allowed players to keep the original version of this mount if they had gotten one. This made the original retired version of the Bone Dragon Mount incredibly rare. If anyone has one, let me know in the comments. Inaccessible locations. Often you'll see a player appearing in normally impossible to reach locations, like behind the bazaar counter, on background islands, or behind grates. Apparently, this is done through certain glitches which can get around the collision of certain objects and allow you to walk past them. It's pretty cool visually, but it won't give you any actual benefit in-game, and there's nothing special you could do in any of these spots besides freak out nearby players. 2-round detritus run. This entry is a little less important now than a few years ago, but it's still worth mentioning. Back when the level cap was 130, Dragoon gear was the best gear in the game. Players could craft this armor using alchemical extracts, salts, and crystals, reagents dropped from the bosses in Wizard City drains and catacombs. Saying that farming for these reagents was a grind would be an understatement. Players would spend months grinding boss after boss just to obtain enough of these reagents for the complete set. Everyone was on board. Specifically, farming the boss King Detritus was the fastest way to obtain these reagents. Not only could King Detritus drop extract salts and crystals, but the instance quest itself for defeating him guaranteed 3 extracts as well. So this dungeon was extremely popular at the time, and players were constantly queuing up for it. It quickly became known that you could defeat King Detritus in just 2 rounds. All you need is a storm hitter and 3 support players for buffs. On round 1, all 3 support wizards faint the boss, while the storm hitter casts an aura. On round 2, all 3 support wizards cast blades, and the hitter casts Stormlord. This would one-shot the boss, saving players a ton of time during their dragoon farming grind. In fact, this 2-round strategy became so popular that the more serious farmers would chastise casual players if they didn't partake in it. So unless you wanted to get yelled at, it was very important to know how this strategy worked. LGBT+ words banned. It's no secret that Wizard101's chat filter is very strict. Even with open chat, tons of words and phrases still aren't allowed and will show up as censored dots. Of course, many of these consist of offensive slurs, but the game also prevents you from typing simple expressive words like gay and lesbian. For years, there's been backlash against KingsIsle for not allowing LGBT+ players to fully express themselves through in-game chat, especially since straight players can just say, "I'm straight." This backlash is especially seen during Pride Month, where players accuse KingsIsle of hypocrisy, because even though KI claims to celebrate Pride, they still don't allow players to fully express their pride through in-game chat. So if players want words like gay and lesbian banned, then why does KI still refuse to allow them? On a forums thread, community manager Spark explains KingsIsle's reasoning, stating some words unfortunately cannot be used for risk of abuse. Also, consider that certain words also may not have an in-game reference that would make sense to allow them to be used at this time. Nick Jonas. This one's very interesting because it's not often at all that Wizard101 collabs with a celebrity. But in May 2011, Disney celebrity Nick Jonas of the Jonas Brothers was hired by KingsIsle to compose and produce 7 musical tracks for Wintertusk. According to the official Wizard101 website, Nick Jonas said, "This was a first for me. I never produced or wrote music for a game, or in this case, a whole world before. So I jumped at the chance to work with KingsIsle. It was very cool to be a part of a project that allowed me to help create the mood for Wintertusk and interact with an audience in an entirely new way."
So started working on the scoring for this video game, and it's been a really fun process.
You can still see Nick Jonas composing a bunch of trumpet vines in Northgard, the central hub of Grizzleheim.
Hey gang, thanks for checking out my music, and I hope you enjoy the new Wintertusk area of Wizard101. See you in the game.
It's pretty cool that KI gave Nick Jonas' character model enough detail to resemble him, because back then, most humans in the game used the standard character model faces. Selena Gomez. This whole event honestly feels like a fever dream, but here's the story. In late 2010, during the release of Crab Alley, there was a temporary promotional event where the real-life singer Selena Gomez was held prisoner in an underwater tower and forced to marry the king.
Ah yes, my vows. To my dear Selena, on the eve of our blissful oceanic nuptials.
Wizardess? Queen? I'm too young to get married, and you're really not my type. Help me! Get me out of here!
You were then assigned to rescue her before the ceremony went through and defeat the king and his allies. Afterwards, Selena says there's been a mix-up and she's not a queen, but just a singer looking to release her new CD. And then she ends up hiring these enemy crabs as new backup dancers for her tour back on Earth. Yeah, I'm not making any of this up. That's the actual plot of the promotional event.
I'm sorry. You seem like nice guys, aside from the kidnapping and all that, but there's been some kind of mix-up. I'm not a wizard queen. I'm an actress and a singer. I'm not really interested in politics, and I have a CD to release. I just want to go home.
The most memorable part of this event are the rewards you get for completing it. A Selena Gomez statue and a portrait of Selena Gomez. Considering these items could only be obtained as quest rewards from over a decade ago, they're extremely rare. and you'll often see posts online from old players showing off these items. One more interesting note about this topic, 5 years later, between July 27th and July 29th, 2015, a hologram of Selena Gomez's character model appeared inside the Storm School, just like it had in the original event. Fans thought this was a teaser for another upcoming Selena Gomez event, but KingsIsle later confirmed it was only a glitch. They fixed this and added the following statement to their July 29th, 2015 update notes. The ghost of Selena Gomez past will no longer appear in the Storm School. Secret Crocotopia Room. This isn't referring to the secret shop in the Oasis, but rather a mysterious secret room located in the Karanan Palace. This room is normally blocked off from the rest of the zone, so no one can enter it, but I found a video from 2016 posted by Jason Goldriver where he was able to glitch inside. Apparently, the way he performs this glitch is by teleporting to his friend while his friend simultaneously teleports to him. The room itself looks unfinished and has no exits. It's circular and split into 4 sections by gates with a bunch of randomly placed braziers, levers, and obelisks. Interacting with each lever opens a gate, but other than that, there's nothing else to do. Perhaps this room was just meant for testing puzzles when the devs were working on the zone. Apparently, this glitch has since been patched and you can no longer enter this hidden room. Trick Spell. On July 27, 2017, during a small update patch, KingsIsle accidentally released a spell called Trick to the game. It was trainable from the Shadow Scholar Velma von Vankman in the Arcanum. The spell costs 0 pips to cast and steals 1 pip from the enemy. At the time, this was game-breaking in PvP.
Look at this! Is this not overpowered? KingsIsle, fix! Look! That's so stupid. Look! Hey, where are your pips at, though?
KingsIsle immediately removed this spell from the game in a quick patch the following day, as it was never intended to be added in the first place. So why was it added? Well, this spell is actually the combat trigger for Shadow Trickster, one of the game's many shadow transformations. During your transformation, every time you hit or place a trap on the opponent, you'll automatically steal 1 pip from them as well. And you guessed it, by casting Trick. So it's no mistake that this spell exists in the game's code, it's just not meant to be trained and used normally by your wizard. Funny enough, a spell called Steal Pip was eventually added to the game in early 2021 that functions exactly the same as Trick. So now you can legitimately have the power to steal a pip from your opponent. You just won't be as cool as someone who did it back in 2017. Marleybone Insignia Gear. Back when the game was first released, there was a set of pirate-themed insignia gear purchasable with crowns from Prospector Zeke. Insignia gear just means gear with school-specific designs. This Marleybone set contained a tricorn, a coat, and a pair of boots for each school. It was later retired from the game, but not entirely removed, meaning that if players purchased this gear before its retirement, they'd be able to keep it. Each piece of gear came with an item card, and aside from the name and stats, there isn't much more information online regarding them. However, I was able to find an old Facebook post and update notes from February 18th, 2010, referencing retired Crown Shop gear. So it's safe to assume this Marleybone Insignia gear was retired around early 2010. And of course, since this was over a decade ago, it's extremely unlikely that you'll find any player today with this gear. But if you're one of the lucky players who purchased it over a decade ago, let me know in the comments. And it's still a mystery why this Marleybone Insignia gear was retired in the first place, since Insignia gear is still very popular to this day among the player base. But it's most likely due to KingsIsle at the time not wanting low-level players having access to powerful item cards in PvP. Frankie Forearms. In early November 2015, KingsIsle released a mobile game called Rise and Destroy. It was available on iOS, Google Play, and the Amazon App Store. I've personally never played this game, but according to the Amazon App Store's game description, you use strategy and a team of massive bugs, dinosaurs, and creatures to rampage your way through enemy buildings to take back your planet from the greedy humans. There's 60 levels, and you can evolve your monsters for maximum damage. Why is any of this important? Well, right around this mobile game soft launch, there was a promotional event on Wizard101. Basically, if you played Rise and Destroy before December 21st, 2015, you get a free code to redeem the Frankie Forearms pet in Wizard101. At the time, Many players took this event for granted and didn't bother getting one, but if you didn't get this pet back then, you're out of luck, because since then, there's been no other way to obtain this pet. And even if you try hatching for a Frankie Forearms, you'll get a crabling instead. So unless you were one of the few that installed Rise and Destroy 7 years ago and redeemed your promo code, there's no way to get your hands on a Frankie Forearms, making this one of the rarest pets of all time. Also, it's worth mentioning you could see one of these little guys running around the Arcanum. It's a super cool touch made by the devs. Sinbad Wand Death Damage. The Sinbad Horde pack was released in the Crown Shop on September 12, 2019. This pack drops a bunch of great loot, but the wands were especially useful at the time because of their amazing stats. Upon release, one of the wands dropped from this pack, the Caputin's Boarding Hook, provided fire and death damage. But here's where things get interesting. 6 days after this pack's September 12th release, there was a morning update on September 18th where KingsIsle switched the Caputin's Boarding Hook to provide fire and myth damage instead of fire and death damage. Community manager Spark posted on the forums, the Caputin's Boarding Hook was intended to give myth magic damage and was balanced and statted myth school accordingly. Unfortunately, the item was giving death magic boost instead of properly offering myth. The intended purpose of the Caputin set, as with other sets, was to be a properly matched theme, fire and myth in this case, across all pieces of gear. This outraged players who spent tons of crowns getting the death damage wand, only to have KingsIsle change this death damage to myth damage. Due to all the community backlash only 5 days after this change, on September 23rd, KingsIsle came up with a new solution. They added death damage back to the wand, while keeping fire and myth damage, such that the Caputin's Boarding Hook now provides damage for all 3 schools. This made players who purchased the wand originally for its death damage very happy. However, going forward, they retired this Caputin's Boarding Hook from the pack and replaced it with the Caputin's Grappling Hook, a version containing only fire and myth damage. Even though this solution satisfied all the players who got their death damage back, it was still unfair for competitive death wizards who had not yet obtained the Sinbad pack wand, because going forward, they'd only be able to get the version with fire and myth damage. Of course, the universal damage wand was always still an option, but it had lower damage. Overall, this was a very controversial issue at the time, and since then KingsIsle has been very careful not to release another pack item with incorrect stats. Atmoplex. If you've ever been around the Wizard101 community on Twitter, you've most likely heard of them. Atmoplex is a Twitter account dedicated to reporting data mined content and news for Wizard101 and Pirate 101. They began way back in October 2016, and to this day continue leaking content, especially before major game updates. They utilize a tool called QuickBMS, which extracts and parses source code files. They also manage a YouTube channel, where they actively leak story spoilers, in-game music, and more. Treasure Card Vault. This refers to an item KI fully developed for Test Realm back in summer 2019, but then scrapped before it was ever released. It functioned just like all the other vaults, except instead of having a cap of only 100 like the Gear, Jewel, and Seed Vault, this one allowed you to store up to 1,000 treasure cards per vault. That's a ton. All variations of treasure card types were capable of being stored too, including monstrology, gardening, and castle magic. The vault itself was available in the Crown Shop for about 2,000 crowns or through crafting, just like all the other vaults. The community was requesting a way to store more treasure cards for years, so everyone was super excited to see it finally come out. But then, during Test Realm, it was suddenly scrapped. When asked why, there were a few answers floating around, but the main reason was stated by KI lead designer Rapbeard on Twitter. If players are hoarding TCs across multiple wizards and multiple accounts, the answer is not to give them the ability to hoard more. That problem is very clearly too many faucets, not enough drains. With a splash of black market behavior tulip bulb mentality. Of course, Rapbeard's referring to the fact that tons of players already make multiple accounts to hoard treasure cards, so KingsIsle should add ways for players to actually use their cards instead of further hoarding them. So it's no surprise that in this same update, the Decathlon was released, an event incentivizing players to actually use their treasure cards. Rapbeard was not the only one to comment on the treasure card vault's sudden disappearance. Lead producer Leah Rubin also stated, "Not everything that goes to Test Realm is going to make it to live servers right away, or in some rare instances, at all," heavily implying the latter, so it's unlikely we'll ever see this item again. Hero 101. Did you know that after the release of Pirate 101, KingsIsle planned to put out a third installment in the 101 universe? Except instead of being themed around wizards or pirates, this game focused on superheroes. Hero 101 was a project in development at KingsIsle between May 2012 and December 2014. You'd play as a superhero and protect a place called Nexus City from evil monsters. And just like in Wizard 101 and Pirate 101, you'd be able to choose from several classes, including Cryomancer, Psychic, Pyromancer, Speedster, Titan, and Vigilante. And apparently the game would have taken place directly on Earth, instead of in worlds previously discovered around the Spiral. Something I found especially interesting when researching this scrap project was that KingsIsle took assets originally intended for Hero 101 and incorporated them later in Wizard 101. This includes newspaper textures in Gobblerton Caramel, and a whole bunch of sci-fi equipment in the Old One's labs in Lemuria. Even some of the music in Lemuria is speculated to have come from Hero 101's development. There's plenty of more information online about Hero 101 that I don't have time to cover right now, so I definitely recommend reading more about this if you're interested. One Ring. The One Ring has been leaked many times by data miners. It's basically a ring with disgustingly high stats and mastery for every school. And although players have spent years trying to find a way to obtain this item, the One Ring is completely unavailable to regular players. It's used strictly by KingsIsle developers for testing purposes, so you're out of luck if you want to get your hands on this. Imagine how game-breaking it would be. Enhanced boss encounters. This one's pretty cool, and I actually didn't know it existed until doing my research. Basically, back in July 2009 when Dragonspire was the final world, during a 1-week event, KingsIsle replaced a bunch of in-game bosses with enhanced versions of themselves. These were known as enhanced boss encounters, and they utilized an early version of boss cheats before boss cheats were ever incorporated as a main feature of the game. According to a forums administrator post on July 1st, 2009, enhanced bosses may now cast additional spells, even when it is not their turn, and they may call extra minions to their side to aid in the battle. When this happens, players will see the word interrupt appear, and they will know that their battle has been interrupted. There's hardly any information available online regarding which bosses were affected and what cheat spells they casted, purely because of how old this event is, but here's what I was able to find. Enhanced bosses included Lord Nightshade, Sergeant Skullsplitter, Smogger, Jade Oni, the Ravenscar Coven bosses, and Malistaire Drake, and a few others. Depending on the boss, interrupt casts include Doom and Gloom, Meteor Strike, Unicorn, and various rank 2 hits. Enhanced Malistaire could even summon a Ghost of Sylvia Drake minion with her actual character model instead of the Wraith model used for her in the Necropolis. During this time, KI was met with scathing posts from the community members opposing this new boss cheat mechanic, claiming it made the game way too difficult. In the end, this was only a 1-week event, so all enhanced bosses were obviously reverted back to their original selves afterwards. But all this community backlash didn't stop KingsIsle from reintroducing the boss cheat mechanic in future worlds. 100k Malistaire. I'm sure you've all heard stories of a 100,000 health Malistaire existing in the game a long time ago. And now that I've explained KingsIsle's 1-week period of enhanced boss encounters, this entry will make a lot more sense. Basically, during this 1-week event in July 2009, in addition to interrupt casts, they also raised Malistaire's health to a whopping 100,000. And given that the level cap back then was 50, this proved to be an extremely difficult challenge for even the most skillful players. Just like all the other enhanced bosses though, Malistaire was reverted back to his original self with only 10,000 health after the event was over. PvP is toxic. This just refers to the overall nature of PvP and how a toxic culture has been built around it. If you've ever participated in competitive PvP before, you've definitely seen this. There's false reporting, where sore losers spam report players for beating them. There's setting, where players basically have super high resist pets for every school, and then check to see who's in the PvP queue before purposefully equipping insanely high resist against them. There's stream sniping, where players watch Twitch live streamers to intentionally match against them and harass them. There's jading, where players purposefully equip as much resist, debuffs, and healing as possible in order to stall their opponents out. And there's so many more toxic aspects of PvP. Of course, not every PvP player is toxic, but there's clearly an overall higher level of degeneracy prevalent in the PvP community than the rest of the game, with plenty of blatant racism, sexism, and other forms of harassment. CL Prequest. This one's real interesting, because it involves a dungeon that KI retired completely from the game. 3 months before the October 2010 release of Celestia, KI put out a preview quest called Swimming with the Stars. It was available only to those who defeated Malistaire, which meant they finished their main quest line up until that point. The preview quest, given by Professor Baelstrom, had you go to the Spiral Geographic Society, a warehouse in Regent Square, to obtain the Celestia Spiral Key. This was not an easy quest by any means. The warehouse had 10 floors, each with a puzzle or a fight. You're warned from the very beginning that the bosses inside cheat. Keep in mind, back then boss cheats were hardly a thing, so it was a new concept for most players. The final boss on the 10th floor, Estrakir Gloomthorn, was extremely difficult and had tons of cheats. The most infamous one being its Fire Nova Interrupt cast, which interestingly enough was the first ever modified creature-specific spell to exist in the game. It actually confused so many players that a Mandela effect occurred, where some players today falsely remember Power Nova as originally being a fire spell, even though they're just misremembering it from the boss fight. Another fun fact about this boss was that it dropped the Wayfinder helmet, a hat which in addition to its stats gives 1 Ninja Pig item card. Up until this point, this was the only way to obtain a Ninja Pig item card, so it was definitely a flex to have this helmet. But the coolest part about all of this to me isn't the helmet or the Fire Nova cheat cast, but rather the fact that KingsIsle removed the prequest completely from the game and retired the Spiral Geographic Archives warehouse, meaning that the sigil is now no longer possible to enter except if you participated in this quest way back in July 2010, before its retirement. That, and the fact that nobody can teleport inside, means that only a super small percentage of players today can enter this dungeon. By the way, at first KingsIsle made this prequest optional, due to community feedback, meaning that too many players complained about how difficult it was. And then they altogether retired it, most likely because it didn't make sense anymore to retrieve the Celestia Spiral Key from a warehouse if it's not required to enter the world. Tomato Basket Glitch, also known as the Mushroom Glitch. Of all the glitches to ever exist in Wizard101, this one's the most infamous because of all the controversy it caused. Long story short, it was an infinite gold scheme. During the release of Azteca in late 2012, there were 2 special housing items obtainable by interacting with them: the Tomato Basket and Glowing Mushroom, each located in different areas in Azteca. What made them special was that you could pick them up an infinite amount of times. So players took advantage of this exploit to pick up as many as they could and quick sell them for a small amount of gold each. Apparently, players would do this tens of thousands of times to rack up gold quick. However, on January 13th, 2013, Wizard101 released this statement. In response to a recent item pickup exploit, KingsIsle Entertainment has sanctioned accounts who intentionally and knowingly repeated this in-game bug. They went on to say, it's one thing to pick up a few of the same item and think, something's not right. It's another to pick up a few dozen of the same item, now you're getting into a gray area. It's wholly another to pick up hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of this item, now you've slipped into the dark side and are clearly exploiting. It's this last group that were sanctioned based on the egregiousness of their infraction. So, news spread like wildfire that KingsIsle was banning players over this bug. The community was outraged. Players wondered if they should really be at fault over a mistake made by the developers, especially when other game companies at the time were rewarding players for identifying bugs. Lots of excuses were being thrown around too. How are players supposed to know this was a glitch? After all, the glowing mushroom did look similar to the deep mushroom reagent, which does naturally respawn. So what if players just got confused? Shortly after, KingsIsle replied to their original messages saying, some sanctions have been reviewed and reduced, so at least some players were able to get their accounts back. Bizarre bots. Ever notice that the reagents tab in the bazaar is completely empty? Doesn't that seem strange considering there's hundreds of players constantly buying and selling them? Well, this is most likely the result of a bazaar bot, a recent tool that players have been utilizing to instantly purchase reagents from the bazaar. Keep in mind, using any kinds of bots in game directly violates the Wizard101 terms of use, so don't try using these. But with a quick Google search, I was able to find info about one of them on GitLab, created by a user tempjanik. Apparently, their bot constantly refreshes the reagents window and captures screenshots of the list of reagents. It then uses image recognition and coordinates to identify and instantly purchase whichever reagents the user desires. As you can imagine, this causes issues because no player will ever be able to outcompete a bot when racing to buy reagents. These bots often buy out the entire reagent section of the bazaar and result in a completely empty list of them. It's pretty unfair. Quick Launcher. Wizard101 Quick Launchers are modded versions of the game launcher. They allow you to load the game way faster by skipping over game patches that normally occur in the launcher. This has become pretty popular in the community, but remember that modifying any game files directly violates KingsIsle's terms of use. Zeke lives in your backpack. I couldn't find any substantial information in the game's lore to confirm or deny this. It seems to me like it's just a joke in the community, but there's actually a little evidence to support it. Zeke does follow your wizard around by traveling world to world, and he has to get there somehow. Also, he's the one to notify your wizard whenever your backpack's full. So how would he instantly know the contents of your backpack if he was anywhere else other than inside it? Also, your backpack can hold up to hundreds of items, so you could argue that a human could magically fit inside. But yeah, I wouldn't look too deeply into this. I don't think the developers intended for him to live inside your backpack. 4 Onis fight. There's a rumor that the original final boss in Mooshu wasn't just against Jade Oni, but all 4 Onis at the same time. I scoured all over the internet looking for footage or documentation to confirm this, and I finally stumbled upon a video from July 15th, 2009 showing a battle against all 4 Onis. Besides the fight itself, there's no other information, so it isn't clear if this was the original final boss fight or test realm footage, or even just a glitch. But I'm speculating it had to do with that 1-week event back in July 2009 where KingsIsle enhanced a bunch of bosses. Perhaps this was the temporary enhanced Jade Oni fight. Broadcast system breach. At around 10 PM on September 16th, 2022, the Wizard101 server messaging system was apparently hacked and a bunch of inappropriate server messages were blasted out to every player in the game. The anonymous hacker basically proclaimed they're a KingsIsle employee and they hate their job. Messages consisted of, "KingsIsle is the worst company I've ever worked for," email support@wizard101.com so I can get a raise, "Next world is my boss's a-hole," "Guys, I need to run," "The wizard police are after me," and a bunch of other messages with profanity. KingsIsle immediately shut down their servers to gain control back from the hacker, so it really looked like a KI employee went rogue and was trying to bring down the company. However, 4 days after this incident, game director Leah Rubin posted a statement apologizing about the event. She confirmed this was an outsider impersonating a KI employee and that extra security measures are being added to their broadcast system to prevent another breach like this from happening again. Overall, this ended up being a win-win for everyone because KingsIsle compensated all players by granting membership and enabling all member benefits for the rest of the month. And this whole ordeal brought a ton of publicity to the game. Plenty of big YouTubers discussed this breach. In fact, the top viewed Wizard101 video of all time is Penguin Zero's video on it. Chinese regulations. Back in 2012, Wizard101 partnered with Taomi, a Chinese children's entertainment company, to roll the game out in China. But due to strict Chinese government content regulations, KI needed to remove every single exposed bone from the game. KI co-founder Todd Coleman stated, "There is a law against showing certain pieces of art that relate to exposed bones. Whenever we had a skeleton walking around, that was seen as being disrespectful for the dead. Showing a skeleton is not necessarily disrespectful, but if that skeleton tried to bludgeon you, then it is disrespectful." It was a pretty big effort to remove exposed bones from the game, as they appear a lot more often than you'd think. In Halloween props, pirate models, random skeletons throughout the game, and more. This actually surprised the KI team. J. Todd Coleman went on to state, "You would be surprised how often a wizard tower would have a skull with a candle on it sitting on a shelf." Overall, it's pretty neat to see some of the character model redesigns KI made to cover exposed bones, and it was definitely worth it to follow these Chinese regulations since the MMO market in China is enormous. Human Grub Guardians. Grub Guardian is an old tower defense mobile game created by KingsIsle where you can log in with your Wizard101 account to earn rewards like pet experience and rare codes. Apparently, according to Reddit user CatBeWeird, there was something very peculiar about this game. The default map used by the devs for testing this game used realistic human models instead of regular mobs. These human models were most likely based off the developers themselves. Since this was just a test map, normally players wouldn't be able to access this, but there was a loophole to glitch into it. If you open the game, switch to airplane mode, then load a DLC map, the game would instead load this weird test map with the human faces as enemies. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any footage to confirm this, but it seems like enough players reported seeing this, so I'll take their word for it. Autoclickers. An autoclicker is a tool that allows you to click a set number of times on a certain spot on the screen. Why is this useful? Some players use autoclickers for AFK farming, basically allowing their wizard to start a fight, cast an AoE hit to win instantly, and then repeat this process over and over. They do this while away from their computer, saving tons of time. With a simple Google search, you'll see there's tons of autoclickers out there, but the most popular one is apparently Autoclicker by Shocker, probably because it's the easiest to use. But don't get too excited. Just like plenty of other entries on this iceberg, using any third-party software directly violates Wizard101's terms of use, so don't try this yourself. Spiral Spoilers Cease and Desist. Spiral Spoilers was an account on Twitter that leaked Wizard101 content. They also were building a project back in 2016 called Graphically Empowered, where they created new texture packs, mods, and storylines for the game. This included a custom game launcher that would open the game faster than normal. Overall, this was a big project, and it started gaining lots of attention from fans. However, in 2016, Spiral Spoilers received a cease and desist letter from KingsIsle forcing them to shut down all operations for violating their terms of use. So the project and account's been entirely scrapped since. Mr. Lincoln memory loss. This one's pretty silly, and honestly, it's most likely just a rumor. I couldn't find a single piece of evidence in-game that proves Mr. Lincoln actually suffers from memory loss. Maybe fans speculate this because he helps you forget training point spells, or maybe it's because he repeats the same tutorial tips over and over to you throughout the game.
Excuse me, but wow, look at that. Congratulations.
Excuse me,
But both of those reasons don't seem plausible enough, so I'd just write this off as another half-baked whiz rumor. It is worth mentioning that there's been a couple fan-made theory videos suggesting Mr. Lincoln is evil and he's running a scam, but these are all just for jokes, and even in these videos, there's nothing suggesting he has memory loss. U/calamitythewiz. Let me start by saying I'm strongly against cyberbullying, so please don't send any hate to users I mentioned on this iceberg. Anyway, here's the story of the most infamous Wizard101 Reddit user. On September 16th, 2020, a user by the name of calamitythewiz made a post on the Wizard101 subreddit announcing she's now on the platform. Her post contained a bunch of Wiz memes, each with a large watermark of her username somewhere on the image. The subreddit immediately exploded with extreme hate and backlash, and there were many reasons for this. Some people disagreed with the content in her memes because most of it was just her complaining about aspects of the game. Some people didn't like her obtrusive watermarks or claimed she stole these memes and passed them off as her own, but the main reason she received so much backlash from the community was how self-entitled she sounded, expecting everyone to know who she was. For weeks, people tore her apart, calling her all sorts of horrible things and telling her to get off the platform. They made tons of memes making fun of her. The main trend became asking who she was, mocking the fact that she expected everyone to know her. Calamity then made a few posts about all the haters, which only brought her more negative attention, And in the end, it appears calamitythewiz stepped away from Reddit and everyone calmed down with all the hate. Screaming in pain. This refers to a feature KingsIsle removed from the game long ago, where your character would scream out loud when getting hit by certain spells. It's not quite clear when this was removed from the game, as it isn't mentioned in any update notes, but it's something players definitely remember. And the voice actors really went all out with this, because boy players sounded like they got smacked in the face, and girl players shrieked as if they got thrown into a wall. It's difficult to find footage of these screams, but here's the best I could find. Overall, these yelling noises made by our characters were very unsettling. It really felt like you were in pain. Mooshu disturbing face. The spirit world is a dimension that can be accessed through the ancient burial grounds in the Tree of Life in Mooshu. It's where you fight the bosses Tomugawa the Evil and Death Oni. Besides this area being creepy itself, with a way darker appearance than the rest of the world, there's something else much more sinister about it. At the rightmost edge, there's an unidentified creepy face in the background that stares at you. Little is known about this face, and it doesn't resemble any character in the game. So it's most likely an unused asset that devs accidentally placed while creating the area back during the game's release and forgot to remove. Regardless, it's very unsettling. Wizard101 is a keylogger. A keylogger is a computer program that records every keystroke made by a computer user, especially in order to gain fraudulent access to passwords and other confidential information. So it's what hackers use to steal information. There's been a few claims over the years that Wizard101 is secretly a keylogger and KingsIsle uses the game to steal and sell your personal information, but this is all just a hoax. It's not true, so you don't have to worry about it. Zeke is evil. This has been a running joke in the community for a while. Usually, whenever a new world is teased, players joke that Zeke is going to be the final boss. But thanks to a Reddit post made by user Wario1116, aka Dolphins fan, there's actually a few reasons in support of this theory. In Eloise's Polaris quest, plotting out polar roses, she says, "You know, Zeke vehemently disagreed at the time, but I told him you were special your first day." This implies that Zeke thought negatively of the player. And in Zeke's Dragonspire quest, The Stone Roses, he states, "Every little thing can be useful, especially in the right hands," which sounds oddly suspicious. And the most striking piece of evidence supporting this theory is an official KingsIsle Entertainment YouTube video from 2010 titled Outtakes from the Pets Commercial Audio. In this video, Merle Ambrose says, well, how about you listen for yourself?
Why, that's amazing. I had no idea Prospector Zeke was behind it all. Oh, wait, is that still a secret? Pay no attention to that then, young wizard.
Unfortunately, there's no further explanation beyond that quote, but I do think it would be a very funny plot twist if KingsIsle does eventually make Zeke an arc villain at some point. Clans. I'm not talking about the new guilds feature introduced in summer 2022, but way back in the early 2010s, player-made clans became a very underground niche part of the game. It's important to note that none of these clans were official. They were not regulated by KingsIsle, aside from taking place inside Wizard101 and thus being restricted by in-game chat moderation. KingsIsle never officially acknowledged their existence. In fact, there's very little evidence remaining about these, but long story short, masses of players would form clans based around their common interests, the most prominent one being roleplay. Clans would often gather at the Nightside Death Tower behind the Commons Waterfall in Realm Scarecrow. This spot was unofficially named Clan World. There's been numerous Wizard101 Central posts reporting profanity, harassment, drama, mass reporting, and generally inappropriate behavior taking place during these clan gatherings, overall making the Scarecrow Death Tower an unsafe environment for regular players. And internally within these clans, there's been rumors of spreading nudes, doxing, and blackmailing members. However, it's hard to prove any of these true with such little information available online, but it's clear that Wizard101 clans were not a family-friendly aspect of the game. Since then, over the past decade, third-party online community platforms such as Discord became a thing, so many of these players migrated to those apps, and in-game clans died out. And now we have guilds, which are very different. Merle kidnaps children. Because Merle Ambrose is the main face of Wizard101, he's come up quite a bit in conversation, and not always in a good way. Think about this. From the beginning of the game, Merle Ambrose forces you, the player, to embark on missions to protect the Spiral. But how did you even get here in the first place? It's confirmed that your homeland is way back on Earth.
But the wizard isn't from the Spiral, they're from Earth.
What?
And even though the player's age is never confirmed in the lore, considering Ravenwood Academy is just like high school with a graduation ceremony and everything, and you're often referred to as a young wizard, it's pretty safe to assume your character is around 16 years old. Okay, so you're a minor from Earth brought to Wizard City against your will from a spell casted by Merle Ambrose? And what about everyone else? The game has over 3 million total players, all of whom were also minors mysteriously brought to Wizard City to begin their adventure. Where's everyone's parents? After all this information is laid out, it's not too far-fetched to think Merle Ambrose partakes in some twisted child trap. And weirdly enough, there's a real website devoted to stopping human trafficking called the Polaris Project. Coincidence? Creepy whispers. There have been many reports of creepy whispering found throughout different areas in the game. In order to hear them, you need to turn your music volume down to 0 and your sound effects volume up to max. Then stand and listen closely, and you might just hear some demonic whispers, clearly not suited for a children's game. For example, if you do this while standing near lava in the Great Citadel, one of the purchasable Dragonspire houses, you'll hear this disturbing voice on repeat. It's hard to decipher what's being said, but most players hear the words, "Find something that can't be found." Very unsettling. Gory Snowman. The original concept for the evil snowman spell was downright disturbing. Apparently, upon spawning, it would stab itself, rip its own heart out of its body, and throw it at the opponent to deal damage. This isn't a joke. Here's a clip from September 2020's KI Live confirming it.
The first iteration of the snowman was a little more gory. So we pulled that one back.
We pulled that back a little bit.
Yeah, we did.
He stabbed his snow heart out and threw it.
Yeah. Yeah, the audience we have now, it probably wouldn't be the end of the world, but when we were first looking at launching the game, we were looking to target very younger users. So we're like, we can't have that.
It's too bad the artwork for this has never been released. It would have been cool to see. Azteca Ghost Girl. Here's the story. On December 15th, 2012, a user by the name of Master of Spells posted on Wizard101 Central with some really disturbing news. His friend had told him he recently bought the brand new Dino bundle for his sister. That night, when his sister was decorating her Pyramid of the Lost Horizon, the house that came with the bundle, she noticed something really disturbing. In the bottom catacombs area of the house, there was a creepy ghost-like female character model standing in the corner, not moving at all. She didn't have a name above her head, and she was wearing the Dark Wraith outfit, except it was dyed all white, which is strange because you can't dye that gear white at all. They thought it was a visual bug at first, so they ignored it. But then a few days later, a few more of their friends had noticed this ghost girl appear as well. At this point, everyone came together and gathered as much information as possible to try to get to the bottom of this, and here's what they found. 1. So far, his sister and a small bunch of other people have seen her. 2. She only appears where the purple rocks are. 3. She seems to only appear around 12 a.m. Eastern Time, so midnight, and then disappear if you exit the area. 4. Her appearances are random. 5. It doesn't seem to be like the random spawn unicorn in the wooded cottage house because only a few people have seen her. Master of Spells ends this post saying he still personally hasn't seen the ghost girl, so he's a bit skeptical. And most of these sightings were from friends of friends, so he can't easily get in touch with any of them to find out more. But he has heard that in a few of these sightings, the ghost girl caused their game to crash. Spooky. It's obviously this is all just a creepypasta. There's a bunch of red flags here. For instance, they claim that the ghost girl only appears at midnight Easter time, but Kings Isle's based in Texas where they go by Central Time instead. And 11 p.m. Central Time seems too random to be used as a predetermined spawn time. Also, they keep claiming that friends of friends experienced this. That's a classic way to get around not having any actual proof. And lastly, the image that's floating around is clearly just photoshopped. That's not how dyed gear looks at all. You can't just add a whitening filter to the whole character model and pass it off as dyed gear. However, there was a claim that Kings Isle officially responded, saying the Azteca ghost girl is classified and a spoiler of some sort. But I looked forever and I couldn't find a single post from the official Kings Isle account about this. So yeah, it's all just a creepypasta. Hellhound. Players have claimed that way back during the game's beta, the Heckhound spell was originally named Hellhound. And since references to hell are too dark for a children's game, parents complained and the developers changed its name to Heckhound. Now there's no evidence to support this, so it's most likely not true and simply a result of the Mandela effect, a phenomenon where masses of people share the same false memory, just like how most of you remember Curious George having a tail even though he doesn't have one. It's still creepy to think about though. Darkmoor Manor Noose. Wizard101 is known for incorporating darker elements into its normally family-friendly atmosphere. I mean, just take a look at what we've already covered on this iceberg. So it's no surprise that once in a while, the developers like to push the boundaries a little further. Back in May 2016, a new Darkmoor themed bundle was released, the Witch Hunters bundle. And if the name wasn't obvious already, then the pilgrim hat and crossbow will definitely tell you that this bundle's based on the Salem witch trials, a period in colonial Massachusetts during the 1690s where hundreds of innocent people were accused of practicing witchcraft and publicly executed without being able to defend themselves. So right off the bat, this bundle covers a pretty dark topic, but it's a section of this bundle's house, the Darkmoor Manor, that particularly upset the community. Outside the front of the manor, there's a noose dangling from a tree branch. Or at least there was. Tons of community members complained about this noose to Kings Isle, saying that it's simply too dark compared to the rest of the game. It is a visual reference to public hangings after all, and the fact that your wizard is dressed in an outfit worn by American pilgrims who happily executed innocent people definitely has some disturbing implications. Kings Isle ended up removing the noose entirely from the Darkmoor Manor shortly after the community's feedback. KKK cosplay. This just refers to the many instances in the past where groups of toxic players wore white robes and hoods in the commons and pretended to be part of the KKK. It's pretty unfortunate the players could find a way to bring racism into the game, and it's not really worth giving them any more attention, so that's all I'll say about this topic. Hopefully they've all gotten banned. Lord Nightshade Original Dialogue. This one's real creepy. Apparently, Kings Isle removed a quote from Lord Nightshade's original dialogue in the beta because it was too dark compared to the rest of the game. Before challenging Lord Nightshade for the very first time, he would say something along the lines of, "Wizard, I am having a vision. I foresee blood splatters and carcasses on the walls. Let us seal your fate." This was deemed too scary for children, so Kings Isle changed his lines to, "Wizard, I am having a vision. I foresee darkness descending upon you. Let us seal your fate." Unfortunately, I couldn't find any footage or documentation of this original darker dialogue to confirm this, so as of right now, it's still just a rumor. Wait, there's actually one more extremely secret entry at the very bottom of this iceberg, and that is... subscribe to Gladrocker. In all seriousness, this video was a passion project of mine, and it took months of effort to make, so I'd really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel. It helps me grow so much, and all your support means the world to me. In fact, YouTube shows me that over 90% of you that watch my videos aren't yet subscribed, So let's change that. It's free to do, and you can always change your mind later on and unsubscribe. Plus, I'd like to unravel some more Wizard101 mysteries in the future, so you want to stay tuned for those as well. But yeah, that's about it. We reached the bottom of the iceberg. I really hope you all enjoyed this journey down the Wizard101 rabbit hole with me, and hopefully you learned some pretty neat stuff along the way. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this experience, and as always, I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace.